July 1981. As Britain cheered the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer, evil was quietly moving through the capital. Amid the confetti and crowds, 8-year-old Vishal Mehrotra began the short journey home from the royal parade and vanished without a trace. Hours turned into days, days into months, and what began as a missing child would become one of the most chilling mysteries ever to haunt Britain, a story of innocence stolen on the happiest day in the nation's history. Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday at 6 p.m, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. On the 27th of September 1972, in the bustling heart of Calcutta, India, a boy named Vishal Damodar Mehrotra entered the world, born to parents Vishambar Mehrotra, a dedicated solicitor who would later rise to become a magistrate and judge in the UK, and Aruna Mehrotra, who eventually separated from Vishambar and returned to her homeland to oversee the family's thriving jewellery business. Their story was one of migration and ambition. The family uprooted from Sri Lanka and emigrated to the UK in 1978, seeking new horizons. They settled in the quiet, leafy suburb of Putney in southwest London at 48 Holmbush Road, nestled in the Southwest 15 postcode area, a modest home that would soon become the epicentre of unimaginable tragedy. Vishal grew up alongside his younger sister, Mamta Mehrotra, who was about 6 years old when the shadows fell over their lives, and, much later, a half-brother named Suchin Mehrotra, born around 1993, far too late to witness the events that would haunt their family forever. With Vishambar consumed by long hours in his legal practice and Aruna absent, the children relied heavily on their live-in nanny, Johanita Carvalho, a steadfast and trusted family employee who managed the daily rhythms of their lives, from meals to bedtime stories, while the parents navigated their separate worlds. Vishal himself was a child who seemed destined for brightness. Family and friends painted him as intelligent, fiercely independent, and effortlessly sociable, fluent in both English and Hindi. He had no record of misbehavior or wandering off, and his self-assurance shone through in small acts of maturity, like commuting alone by train to school without a hitch. Vishal's education unfolded at St. James's Independent School, a primary-level institution located at 22 Queensgate in London, an independent co-educational establishment in the upscale Kensington area, where he was enrolled from the late 1970s until 1981, attending as an 8-year-old boy full of potential. This school would later gain infamy for its historical abuse allegations, casting a dark shadow over its legacy. It was here that Vishal formed a profound friendship with Ben Holm, his best mate, who also attended St. James during those formative years, forging a bond that would endure through the pain of what was to come. The school's atmosphere harbored whispers of a dark side, with reports of teacher mistreatment that Ben Holm himself would later reference in relation to his own harrowing experiences. Ben Holm was Vishal's closest companion at age 8 in that fateful summer of 1981. Their friendship was the stuff of innocent childhood joy, filled with outdoor adventures in Putney's green spaces and cozy sleepovers that created memories etched in time. Holm would later allege in interviews that he endured severe sexual and physical abuse at school around age 8 to 9, including insidious grooming, brutal assaults by staff, physical beatings with belts and canes, and a chilling culture of silence enforced through threats that silenced victims. He estimates that dozens of boys suffered similarly, contributing to investigations that led to convictions and sweeping reviews of the system. The early 1980s in London were a time of creeping danger for children, with a surge in abductions and exploitation that left parents on edge. Cases like the 1979 disappearance of 15-year-old Martin Allen near Gloucester Road Underground Station lingered unsolved, tenuously connected to scandals like the Elm Guest House, where whispers of elite abuse networks swirled. Looming largest was Sidney Cook's infamous Dirty Dozen gang, a ruthless ring prowling West London, notorious for snatching boys aged 8 to 15 in broad daylight, subjecting them to horrific assaults and dumping their bodies in remote rural spots. Key figures like Cook, the gang's leader, and Leslie Bailey, a convicted accomplice, disguised their evil as traveling fairground workers throughout the 1970s and 1980s, granting them easy mobility between bustling London fairs and isolated Sussex countryside hideaways, perfect cover for scouting vulnerable prey and spiriting them away. And in Horsham, Sussex, Muntham House School stood as a grim hub for organised abuse in the 1970s and 80s, where staff allegedly transported boys from London for exploitation, layering even more systemic peril to innocent lives like Vishal's. On the night of the 28th of July 1981, Ben Holmes stayed over at the Mehrotra family home at 48 Holmbush Road in Putney. This was a planned sleepover filled with the simple joys of games and bedtime stories shared with nanny Juanita Carvalho. Holmes left early that next morning, waving goodbye to his best friend Vishal before the family set off for central London to witness the royal wedding. In interviews years later, Holmes would express a haunting guilt over not being there to walk Vishal home that afternoon, though he played no role in the events that unfolded. Between the morning and early afternoon of the 29th of July, the Mehrotra family, Vishambar, Vishal, Mamta and nanny Juanita Carvalho, travelled by train from Putney to central London, positioning themselves to watch the royal wedding procession of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer from the window of Vishambar's workplace office near the parade route on Fleet Street. The spectacle drew massive crowds, with roughly 750 million viewers worldwide tuning in, and security was ramped up amid IRA threats, straining police resources citywide and possibly slowing responses to emerging crises like missing persons reports. Around 1:40 p.m. at East Putney Station, the family arrived back on Upper Richmond Road via the District Line underground train. Vishambar, exhausted from the festivities, walked home alone, covering about half a mile along Holmbush Road in roughly 10 minutes. Before parting, he gave Vishal and Mamta £20 each, equivalent to about £78 in today's money, to buy sweets, instructing Carvalho to keep a watchful eye on the children during their outing. From 2 to 2:20 p.m. at the Putney High Street newsagent, under Carvalho's supervision, the children spent about 20 minutes picking out treats. Both Vishal and Mamta complained of sore throats from all the cheering at the wedding earlier that day. Between 2:20 to 2:30 p.m. near the pedestrian crossing, Carvalho decided to buy cough medicine at a nearby pharmacy further along Upper Richmond Road. Vishal, tired but familiar with the short walk home, a route he took independently for school, asked to go ahead alone. Carvalho agreed, escorting him across the busy crossing at the Putney High Street and Upper Richmond Road junction, watching him head east toward Holmbush Road. This moment marks the last confirmed sighting of Vishal, captured in Juanita Carvalho's statement reported on the 29th of July, the last sighting of Vishal walking home alone, 2:30 p.m. From 2:45 to 3 p.m., upon returning to the pharmacy, Carvalho completed the purchase of the cough medicine with Mamta and returned to the family home at 48 Holmbush Road. Vishambar was asleep upon their arrival, and there was no immediate sign of Vishal. Carvalho assumed he was playing outside or had arrived and gone to rest, so she and Mamta took a nap without raising an alarm. At around 4 p.m., a woman and her husband headed to Deodar Road to walk up the steps of the bridge that leads to Putney Bridge Station. They saw a boy standing at the bottom of the steps, all on his own, acting peculiarly. After 5 minutes, they returned back, and the boy was still stood by the steps, eating a chocolate bar with an orange and silver wrapper, acting strangely. The boy had prominent canine teeth, they noted. Sometime that afternoon, a witness named Jill Exelby reported seeing a boy matching Vishal's description, described as an excited Asian child running up and down the carriage, putting his feet up on chairs, smiling and laughing, noting his trainers as white with a blue flash or stripe, on the District Line tube heading to Balham as she was returning from visiting her daughter. He was accompanied by a scruffy man described as cat-weasel-like, resembling Leslie Bailey, a Sydney Cook gang member who appeared to be taking note of the boy. She called the police the next day after recognizing Vishal from newspaper photos, stating, "This is the boy I saw on the train." But no officers visited or followed up on her claim. At 4:30 p.m., back at Holmbush Road, the family awakened and Vishal's absence became apparent. Carvalho and Mamta began an initial search of neighboring homes along Holmbush Road, knocking on doors and inquiring with residents, but no sightings were reported. From 5 to 7 p.m., the search escalated as Vishambar joined, expanding to local parks such as Putney Common and contacting friends, school associates, and other known contacts. No leads emerged, heightening concern amid the post-wedding chaos. A travelling fairground was operating on Putney Common that day, coinciding with the royal wedding celebrations and drawing large crowds of families and children to the area, potentially creating distractions, increased foot traffic, and opportunities for opportunistic abductions. Police later noted this as a complicating factor in the initial search, with fairground workers, including transient labourers, among those interviewed, though no direct links to Vishal were established. This ties into broader Cook gang patterns, as members like Bailey and Cook often posed as fairground hands to access child-heavy events. By 7 p.m., Vishambar formally reported Vishal missing to the Metropolitan Police at Putney Police Station on Disraeli Road. Police initially classified it as a lost child amid the wedding crowds, with early theories focusing on disorientation rather than foul play. The abduction window was estimated at between 2:20 to 4:30 p.m., but the lack of immediate CCTV technology, not widely available in 1981, hindered evidence collection. From the 30th of July to early August, the Metropolitan Police launched a comprehensive search operation, deploying thermal imaging helicopters to scan Putney Common and the River Thames, which was also dredged for potential remains, conducting house-to-house inquiries that interviewed over 14,000 residents, and issuing public appeals through BBC and ITV news broadcasts. Hundreds of false sightings were reported nationwide, such as a boy matching Vishal's description in Bristol and Manchester, all investigated and all dismissed. Police theories included Vishal getting lost in the wedding crowds, a possible racist-motivated abduction given the family's Indian heritage and recent Brixton riots, or an attempt to board a train back to India, which prompted Interpol-assisted checks at airports and other ports. The operation involved around 100 officers at its peak, costing approximately £1 million in 1981 value, but yielded no solid leads. An unnamed local woman came forward and reported seeing a boy resembling Vishal appearing upset and wet, possibly from rain, tears, or distress, with disheveled clothing, standing alone near a bus stop on the A272 road in Rogate, close to Alder Copse, the eventual disposal site about 1 mile away. The sighting, estimated late afternoon or early evening on or around the 29th of July 1981, suggested the child had been transported southwest from London. She contacted police via the hotline shortly after media appeals, describing him as a small Asian boy looking lost and crying, but the report was categorized as a false sighting and not followed up, dismissed due to vagueness and lack of corroboration. This lead would later resurface in later reviews. Late November to early December 1981, around 8 p.m, for about 5 minutes, Vishal Mehrotra received an anonymous phone call at the family home in Putney from a man in his mid-20s, identifying himself as a gay sex worker who worked at or frequented the Elm Guest House in Barnes, approximately 1 mile from the abduction site. The caller, speaking in a calm but urgent tone with a local London accent, alleged that Vishal was abducted shortly after leaving the pedestrian crossing on Holmbush Road and taken directly to the Elm Guest House, where he was subjected to abuse and subsequently killed by important people involved in a high-profile ring. He specifically stated, "Your son was taken to the Elm guest house. He was abused by important people and then killed." The caller further asserted that he had previously reported the same information to the Metropolitan Police several weeks earlier, but officers dismissed him outright, laughing it off as nonsense from a rent boy and refusing to take details or investigate the premises. Vishambar, shocked but composed, recorded the entire 5-minute conversation on a home tape recorder, capturing the caller's voice clearly without interruption. He immediately contacted Putney Police Station the next day to hand over the tape and transcript, urging detectives to raid the Elm Guest House, a Victorian villa known locally for hosting themed sex parties with young male prostitutes since at least 1980. However, the officers reviewed the recording in a cursory manner. No formal voice analysis or forensic audio enhancement was conducted, despite available 1980s technologies for such, labeling it as a cruel prank by a fantasist, and filled it away without any follow-up inquiries, such as interviewing the caller, searching the guest house, or cross-referencing with other tips. This inaction later fueled allegations of police corruption, as the Elm Guest House was raided by Scotland Yard in March 1982, some 3 months after the call, on unrelated vice charges, uncovering evidence of pornography and a guest book with high-profile names, including politicians and celebrities, but no connection to Vishal was pursued at the time. In 2023, a BBC audio expert reanalyzed the tape and deemed it credible, noting the caller's consistent details, lack of fabrication markers, and mid-20s male voice matching the self-description, prompting renewed scrutiny. The episode exemplifies broader police failings in the case, including ignored leads tied to the Westminster ring scandal. The abduction site on Holmbush Road was thoroughly searched for physical evidence, but pre-DNA era limitations meant no fibers, footprints, or other traces were recovered. The investigation process involved initial door-to-door canvassing, public reconstructions of Vishal's last movements, and coordination with Sussex police for rural searches, though focus remained on London. A travelling fairground was set up opposite Alder Copse in Rogate during that late summer in 1981, drawing local crowds and providing transient workers with access to the remote woodland. This setup, common for seasonal events in rural Sussex, could have facilitated discreet body disposal amid the activity. Police later interviewed fairground staff during the joint inquiry, noting overlaps with Cook Gang members' fairground employment, but no concrete connections could be made. On the 21st of February around 3 p.m. at Alder Copse, Durley Marsh Farm, Rogate, 2 unnamed local pigeon shooters stumbled upon partial human remains while in the remote, boggy woodland area of Alder Copse, approximately 50 miles southwest of Putney, near the A272 road. The discovery included a child-sized skull with fractures, 7 rib bones, and a section of vertebrae, buried about 2 feet deep in peat and scattered over a 10-meter radius due to fox disturbance. The shooters immediately notified Sussex police, who secured the site. From the 22nd to the 24th of February, a forensic team led by pathologist Professor Bernard Knight excavated the site with around 30 officers, recovering additional fragments including pelvis pieces and arm and leg bones, totaling about 40% of the skeleton. No clothing, shoes, or personal items were found, suggesting the body was stripped post-mortem. The absence of the hyoid bone raised suspicions of strangulation, though unconfirmed due to decomposition. On the 25th of February, the remains were transferred to Guy's Hospital in London for a full post-mortem examination. Forensic analysis determined the child's age as between 8 to 9 years old, based on dental eruption patterns. Time since death as approximately 7 months, supported by bog preservation and adipocere formation, indicating a summer burial, and cause of death as undetermined but likely asphyxiation or smothering, with no visible defensive wounds on the bones. Sexual motive was inferred from the naked burial. The identification was confirmed on the 28th of February via dental records matching Vishal's. The site's isolation in a peat bog off Main Road suggested the perpetrator had intimate local knowledge of Rogate. A joint Metropolitan and Sussex police inquiry was established, but no immediate suspect emerged. Following the remains discovery, Martin Evans, age 33, a driver en route to Cornwall, reported to Sussex police a summer 1981 sighting of a bronze-coloured P or R registered car with 2 doors parked awkwardly near Alder Copse on the day Vishal went missing. He described the man inside as scanning the woods intently, which struck him as Reconnaissance-like. Evans had scribbled the registration number on a cigarette packet for later reporting, but disposed of it during his drive to Cornwall, assuming no immediate relevance. The report was logged but initially dismissed as peripheral. In February 1982, a sensitive police report noted that hair samples collected from Vishal's body disposal site were destroyed in an incinerator shortly after the post-mortem, undermining future DNA possibilities. This loss, attributed to standard procedures at the time, has been criticized in later reviews as a missed opportunity for modern forensics, though no samples survived for retesting. Later in 1982, an unnamed individual with prior convictions for abusing boys confessed during a police interview to killing Vishal, providing details that initially seemed credible. However, he retracted the confession shortly after, and police deemed him an inveterate liar due to his history of false statements. The lead was not pursued decisively as it lacked corroboration, but it resurfaced in 1980's Cook Gang probes as a potential red herring or overlooked clue. In 1983, while serving time at Wandsworth Prison for unrelated offences, Nicholas Douglas, a former teacher at Muntham House School, authored a 10-page document titled Vishal, depicting a fictionalized narrative of abusing a boy named Vishal. Douglas later claimed it was inspired by media coverage of the case. The document is held by Sussex police from the 1990s but not connected to the murder until a 2019 review. Douglas has denied direct involvement, stating the name was just the first Asian name in the press he could think of, but the document is seen as a potentially important lead in later inquiries. From 1987 to 1988, the Metropolitan Police's specialized Dirty Dozen unit, led by Detective Superintendent Roger Studley, intensified investigations into Sidney Cook's predatory gang, noting striking similarities to Vishal's case, daylight abductions, assaults and naked body disposals in rural areas, as seen in the 1985 murder of Jason Swift. During prison interviews, gang member Leslie Bailey boasted about the gang's involvement in killing an Asian boy, providing vague details that align with Vishal's profile, though Bailey later recanted. The Met collaborated with Sussex police for joint meetings, identifying strong similarities but lacked concrete evidence to pursue charges. Sidney Cook was never formally questioned regarding Vishal. In 1988, an unnamed lorry driver contacted police, recalling seeing an Asian boy matching Vishal's description at around 3 p.m. on the 29th of July 1981, being waved down by a white man in his 30s with fair hair in a white van at an M4 lay-by in West London. The report was dismissed due to timing discrepancies, and no vehicle, vibers, or other forensics were matched, as no physical samples existed from the scene. On October 7, 1993, in the dim confines of Whitewar Prison, Leslie Patrick Bailey, the 40-year-old accomplice in one of Britain's most reviled child sex rings, was found strangled in his segregated cell. Bailey, already a lifer for his role in the 1985 manslaughter of 14-year-old Jason Swift and the 1985 murder of 6-year-old Barry Lewis, had just pleaded guilty earlier that year to the manslaughter of 7-year-old Mark Tildesley, who was snatched from a Wokingham fun fair in June 1984. His body never recovered. A post-mortem confirmed homicide by strangulation, and in 1995, two fellow inmates, Michael Caine, a convicted robber, and John Brooks, serving time for burglary, were convicted of the murder at Norwich Crown Court, receiving life sentences themselves after admitting they targeted Bailey in a brutal act of prison justice, fueled by whispers of threats against files and the gang's legacy of up to 20 unsolved child killings. Bailey's death silenced a man who had boasted in prison about the Dirty Dozen gang's atrocities, including vague claims of an Asian boy murder that tantalizingly echoed Vishal Mehrotra's unsolved 1981 case, taking any unspoken truths about the ring's depravities and potential connections to other banished innocents irrevocably to the grave. In 1998, former teacher Nicholas Douglas was sentenced to 16 years at Lewes Crown Court for 17 offences against 10 boys at Muntham House between 1976 and 1983, with victims describing transports from London care homes to Sussex for abuse sessions. In the 2000s, Vishal Mehrotra was appointed as a magistrate and judge, leading him to speculate in private notes about a possible grudge motive related to his legal work, though these were unsubstantiated. The family continued petitioning for reviews, but the case entered a period of stagnation with minimal police activity. In 2014, James Russell, a shadowy London-based child predator with deep ties to the predatory rings that stalked boys in the 70s and 80s, walked free from Sussex Crown Court after being acquitted on charges of abusing young boys in 1980 and 1981, a verdict that sent chills through survivors and investigators alike, as it spared him from the full weight of justice for crimes that mirrored the era's underbelly of exploitation. Russell, a man whose unassuming facade hid a history of grooming and assaulting vulnerable children, was known to prowl West London circles with connections to Sussex care homes, where boys were allegedly shuttled for weekends away that masked unspeakable horrors, echoing the transport networks uncovered in later Muntham House inquiries. What thrust him onto the police radar in the Vishal Mehrotra case was not just his predatory footprint, but the eerie match between his vehicle and a chilling 1981 sighting, Martin Evans, then driving through the rural twilight of Rogate, who spotted a bronze or gold two-door with a P or R registration plate parked awkwardly in a lay-by near Alder, Copse, the very boggy woodland where Vishal's partial remains would surface 7 months later. The description, alleged to resemble Russell's gold Toyota Corolla liftback, painted Russell as a potential dumper or scout in the 50-mile journey from Putney to Sussex. Police did investigate him as part of the 2020 Panorama leads and ongoing re-examination, questioning his West London haunts and care home links that aligned with survivor accounts of boys ferried from the capital for abuse. But with evidence eroded by decades and his 2023 death in October, no charges ever struck, leaving Russell's acquittal as another thread in a tangled web of leads that slipped through the fingers of a flawed system, forever linking his shadow to the unsolved void where Vishal once walked. In March 2015, the Metropolitan Police self-referred itself to the Independent Police Complaints Commission, now known as the IOPC, amid allegations of corruption, including potential cover-ups of tips related to the Elm Guesthouse scandal and ignored leads from the 1981 anonymous caller to Vishal Mehrotra. In May 2015, Sussex Police released documents from a 2005 internal review confirming prior links to the Cook gang and recommending biennial assessments. Sussex Police noted only one formal review had been conducted since 1981, far below recommended standards, with recent statements emphasizing no proportionate or viable lines of inquiry due to evidence degradation. From July 2015 to 2019, Vishal's long-dormant case flickered back into the spotlight under Operation Midland, a controversial Metropolitan Police inquiry launched in 2014 to probe an alleged VIP ring preying on children in the 1970s and 1980s, a probe that would unravel into one of the force's most humiliating debacles. At its heart was witness Carl Beech, using the pseudonym Nick, a former nurse whose graphic testimony painted a nightmarish tableau of elite abuse. He claimed to have been groomed and assaulted as a boy by high-profile political and elite figures, witnessing the murders of 3 young boys, one at a Dolphin Square party, another at Carlton Street, and a third at the infamous Elm Guesthouse in Barnes, the very venue whispered in Vishal's 1981 anonymous tip. Beech's accounts briefly linked Vishal's abduction to this shadowy network, as digital forensics revealed he'd searched Vishal-related articles on his work computer while crafting his narrative, suggesting a deliberate weave of real tragedies into fabricated horror. Hope surged for Vishal's family. Vishal Mehrotra, by then a judge, pressed for the Elm Guesthouse angle, but it all crumbled when Beech's lies unraveled. In July 2019 at Newcastle Crown Court, he was convicted on 12 counts of perverting the course of justice, including perjury and fabricating evidence, after admitting his stories were completely false under cross-examination. Judge Mr. Justice Marks branded him a fantasist who exploited genuine victims like Vishal for sympathy and compensation, sentencing him to 18 years in prison. The fallout was seismic. Operation Midland, costing over £2 million, was shut down in March 2016 amid internal reviews slamming tunnel vision and bias, discrediting Beech's testimony entirely and slamming the door on Vishal's brief revival, leaving the Mehrotras to decry yet another institutional betrayal and a saga of shattered leads. Around 2019, former Metropolitan Police cold case specialist Detective Sean Keep reviewed archived files and discovered Nicholas Douglas's Vishal Document, held since the 1990s. This strengthened links to the Muntham house abuse ring, identifying 4 offenders, including Douglas and 3 associates, one of whom, James Russell, who had fled to Sri Lanka. Survivors, 3 anonymous former Muntham pupils, provided statements in 2020 BBC interviews, detailing 1981 transports from London to Sussex for abuse, including one associate, an unnamed social services employee known for an obsession with tying boys and vehicles resembling known suspects. These claims remain unverified, but amplify suspicions of organised networks. In October 2020, BBC's Panorama programme aired new leads from an abuse survivor implicating James Russell's gold Corolla in sightings near Rogate and a social services figure in boy transports. Detective Sean Keep described it as a turning point in the investigation, prompting Sussex police to revisit files. Also in 2020, in December, St James's Independent Schools paid out nearly £1 million in compensation to former pupils alleging physical and psychological abuse in the 1970s and 80s via a redress scheme following survivor disclosures. Claims included beatings, grooming, and a culture of control. Up to £30,000 per claimant was issued. This ties to Vishal and Ben Holm's time at the school, amplifying the context of the era's institutional risks, though no direct links to Vishal exist. On May 9, 2023, a man named David Balfour, a former firefighter, came forward after a BBC podcast claiming he saw a Vishal-like boy the day after the disappearance with a man in khaki clothing, odd for the setting, at the Devil's Punch Bowl in Surrey, about 11 miles from Rogate. The boy appeared distressed. Other sightings of a khaki-clad man with an Asian boy were reported that day but not followed up. Balfour reported this in 1981, but it was ignored due to insufficient detail. On May 11, 2023, Sussex Police announced a re-examination of the case led by Detective Superintendent Mark Chapman. Chapman assured a clear direction with focus on viable lines, including re-interviewing survivors and researching sites, but stated no proportionate or viable lines of inquiry based on current evidence. And as of the airing of this documentary, the case remains open, but no new leads or fresh information leaves it stubbornly dormant. As the echoes of that joyous royal wedding day in 1981 faded into the relentless march of time, we are left with the haunting silence of Vishal Mehrotra, a vibrant 8-year-old boy whose laughter once filled the streets of Putney, whose independent spirit promised a future brimming with possibility, and whose trusting steps homeward were forever silenced by an unimaginable cruelty. Vishal embodied the quiet resilience of a family chasing dreams across continents, only to have his light extinguished in the shadow of systemic failures, ignored whispers, and the predatory grasp of those who preyed on innocence. Though justice remains elusive, Vishal's story endures as a beacon against the darkness, a reminder that every missing child is a universe unlived, every unsolved echo a call to remember, to fight, and to ensure no other boy walks alone into oblivion. Rest in peace, Vishal. Your memory walks with us still. Thank you for watching and listening to Vishal's story. Please feel free to add your own thoughts and theories in the comments down below, and we'll see you next time.